What's up, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with Tesla SPY and the overall market. Just note that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $1,000, you're guaranteed 15 in total, not to mention 8.1% APY on uninvested cash. The offer ends very soon in just 5 days. Anyways, now let's talk about the market. So, as far as Tesla's going, we have a big bearish engulfing candlestick that's forming right here, which is showing some weakness. And we need to see Tesla reclaim 343. Otherwise, there's a bigger risk of this dipping even lower. So I'm going to first talk about the news that came out. And I'll break down some important things about the charts and such. So let's talk about that before I break down more details about anything else. So just know that as far as Tesla goes, I wanted to just say that with the way that Tesla is moving, it's been adding a lot of money in terms of its market cap. But I want to call out the fact that there are different analysts out there who are saying that Tesla has a lot of potential for insane growth, especially that 20 to 30% target, which is a rough estimate. But they did mention the fact that with a lot of things that are going on, we have to be a little bit concerned about these different factors, especially because of like different wars going on and factors just like this. And then there are analysts out there who are saying that despite the fact that Tesla's run the way it has, they increased their price target of Tesla to about 226 per share, which is why I think, and that's one of the many reasons why Tesla sold off just a bit. They're very bullish for the long term of Tesla, but they are saying that for the short term, it's very difficult to give the robotaxi evaluation. There's a lot of things happening in the economy which could be affecting Tesla, and they did talk about the tax credits. So with things going on, SPAC has come out. They maintained a sell rating on Tesla. They did lift their targets, but they are saying once again, 226 is what their price target is. They think Tesla's going to be dipping back down to that. But for the much longer term, they did imply that they do see a lot of growth coming, especially from the cyber cab, at least for many, many years to come. So for the short term, they are a little bit more bearish, but for like the more long term, they're still very bullish, and they still have a very, very nice looking view. They also mentioned the fact that they think that Tesla can be a little bit overvalued compared to before. So that's what SPAC is essentially saying. And, it's their opinion. That's completely understandable. But despite the fact that they are still very bullish for the long term, their short term targets are still a little bit more bearish for 226 a share. That's one of the reasons why Tesla dipped. There's also this news right over here about how in the state of California, California's plan is basically going to be excluding Tesla from many of these tax credits, unfortunately. And that's gotten a lot of these, it's caused a lot of noise, at least out there. Could this be the cost of, a lot of politics? You could truly say that, especially because of how California is. But, honestly, guys, I'm not really worried about this. Tesla's going to be completely fine for the long term. Their sales are going to remain very strong, in my personal opinion. I'm not as worried about that. In California specifically, things are very political. And I think that with politics getting in the way, especially with Musk's views and what he has said, things happen. This is a little bit more negative for Tesla. You guys could say that with the shifts that are coming to their policies and how, Tesla's not really benefiting as much from Californian sales, but things will be fine. I think things will be completely fine with Tesla nonetheless as time goes on. Musk has already said that he's not really worried about this, but just know that with a lot of things going on, especially in California, with Tesla being excluded, sad news, and that could be another reason why we saw Tesla dip. But nonetheless, guys, like I said before, Tesla is going to be completely fine. As far as Nvidia goes, Nvidia is once again an absolute monster. Shares are still being affected by what's going on from earnings. So this article is essentially talking about how the expectations were very high, especially for the projected growth. They're expecting 54% revenue growth in 2025. So that's the harder thing for Nvidia. We know that there's so much growth potential in this as they develop these chips. But the problem for Nvidia is that Wall Street has super high expectations now, and they may not always meet those expectations. So even if they beat the expectations, right? Like they beat all expectations on the latest earnings report, but it wasn't until a very, very big extent, right? We wanted them to beat by many, many billion. Instead, we got about a zero point 0.4 billion in their overall revenue beat. So yeah, they beat, but not to the extent that Wall Street was hoping for. And that's the reason why it's sold off, which is pretty wild. Plus, it's at a very, very high valuation. So that's not what you would be surprised by when it comes to high valuation stocks with high PE ratios. For the broader markets, just know that tomorrow is going to be Tuesday, November 26th. At 10 a.m., expect some volatility because of consumer confidence, not to mention the Richmond Fed manufacturing numbers. And then at 2 p.m., we have the FOMC minutes, so look for some volatility then. Besides that, we have Zoom announcing their earnings. Then for Tuesday, we have like Kohl's, Best Buy, Macy's, and a few more. And then Dell. And then for Thursday, we have nothing that's too important that's coming out alongside Friday. Friday, we just have half a day on Friday and then no trading on Thursday for Thanksgiving. But that's it for earnings. We just had Zoom. So as far as Zoom goes, I'm going to be kind of quick with this. They did relatively well with earnings. They saw their overall video communication revenue go up by about 4% to $1.18 billion, above expectations. EPS is also quite good at 66 cents per share. That's up from before. Nice growth. And they also raised their guidance, at least in terms of their EPS. This is now forecasted to be between $5.41 to $5.43 above expectations. The revenue outlook, however, is very close to what we were expecting, so that was so. The market is greedy, but it's becoming more neutral, I think, as the market starts to slow. We're at these extremes in terms of our momentum, and then also know this down, let me just see right here. We're seeing that the puts and call option ratio from the 5-day average is going down. So people keep on closing puts, buying calls over and over and over again. And when we hit these extremes, that oftentimes is when the market starts to pivot. And I think we're getting very close to that right now. There might be a small dip coming to the markets as a result of that. Tesla had volume at about 91 million, which is still very close to average. And short volume is starting to go up again. And then when it comes to their overall financials, the revenue per share once again remains elevated, but just be careful with Tesla because of what these different analysts are saying. So it's possible this is like a cup and handle, but I'm not really counting on that as much because of one issue. On the daily, Tesla has a very bearish looking daily candlestick, and we look kind of weak on the daily. So I anticipate we're going to be filling this gap. There might be a small dip coming to Tesla, so be very wary of that. So keep that in mind, guys. We have this resistance to watch for at 343. If Tesla reclaims that, we could push back up. Otherwise, we're at risk of retesting 328 and then filling the gap down to about 320. So I do see a risk of downside for Tesla. For SPY, just know this, we're at risk of downside in the 4-hour time frame. We got to reclaim 600, but notice that we hit the 600 to 602 area. We rejected, came close to 600, rejected, hit 600, rejected. It's a tough resistance. It's very psychological as well. So there is this risk of us coming back down towards 594, close to our 20 EMA. This might be dipping a little bit lower. If that fails us, we have 591.5 as our next potential target for more downside. Keep that in mind. For ES, we're rejecting here. We're looking for essentially 59.83 as our support. The 59.63, we might be dipping a little bit lower, and we'll have to see how it reacts. But there is that risk of downside looking at this chart. For Nvidia, we look weaker. We need to try to hold above 135.8. It's possible we get a small rebound off our 20 EMA before it continues lower. But I think there's a risk of Nvidia dipping even lower, all the way down to the lower 130s. 132 could be coming if we don't hold 135. So we'll see if buyers try to defend it for a temporary bounce, but there is that risk of downside nonetheless. Bitcoin looks a little bit weaker. We have 92,500 as our support. Could attempt to rebound before it continues to dip, and we're looking for essentially the 90,000 area. So watch and see how it ends up reacting to that. For others out there, as you guys can see, Tesla's looking weaker. We have that gap down there to fill. NQ is looking weaker. We're going to be looking for 20,800 as our support. If that fails us, we're going to be dipping back down for 20,725. We are showing some weakness. Watch 20,819 as our support. Otherwise, we dip lower. And we'll see if we reclaim 21,000 to turn bullish. But I think this is favoring a dip down to at least the 20,700 area. The QQQ also could be forming kind of like a inverse cup and handle. We're looking for 504 as the support here. If that breaks, 502 and 500 are likely coming. And then eventually 497, very close to this 200 EMA. So I see some weakness on the QQQ and a risk of some downside if I'm going to be very frank with everyone. For Apple, we pumped very, very nicely to about 233 and we're dipping. We could be dipping back down for essentially 229 if we get that rejection. So watch 230 to be retested. We'll see if we bounce off that or not. Otherwise, there's a risk of downside. Netflix, we called out downside in my previous video. We need to reclaim 876. Otherwise, this thing will continue to dip. And I think there's a risk of 850 if 876 is not reclaimed. MSTR looks bearish. I'm expecting 376 to be retested. We'll see if we bounce or not. Otherwise, we dip down to about 350. So look for more downside. Celsius has rejected here. It needs to reclaim 30. Otherwise, it's at risk of 28.73. Supermicro, we're looking at 37 as our main support. We'll see if we bounce off this or not. I do want to say that this is looking at strong, but the problem is we do have a tough resistance at 38. So if it breaks 38, we're looking for 40 plus. 38 and 40 are going to be the two resistance areas. If we break that, we're going to be continuing this pump. But if we reject off 38, we're looking for 37.19 as the last support. If that breaks, we come back down to fill the gap at 30, from 35 to 33. So let's try to break 38 to 40 to be bullish. We have a tough resistance there. If we break that, this thing continues to pump. If it rejects, we come back down to 35 and 33. So we'll have to see what kind of move we make. Palantir has a double top. Just know this, off this bearish divergence double top, we're looking for essentially 63.18 as our support. If that fails us, we're looking for a dip back down for 61. So we'll have to see how it goes. We pumped all the way up to 12 at this resistance and we started dipping lower towards 11. We could be dipping lower before it tries to bounce, but just know Rivian does have a risk of some downside. So if I had 16 as resistance, our support to watch was at not only 15.5, but also 15.1. So it might be dipping close to about 15.1 before it tries to rebound. For the IWM, we have a bearish divergence. This is at risk of downside. We're at this gap fill right now at 239. We might see some buyers try to step in to defend this gap, but if it does not hold 239, I expect 237, very close to our 20 EMA, to be tested. AMD is attempting to rebound. We do have a gap below to fill, so we'll see if 140 holds us. If 140 holds, it could continue to try to push for 142. If 140 breaks, we have a gap to fill back down for 138. ARM also has resistance at 140.5. We have support at 136 below that. So we're stuck in the middle. If we don't hold above 140, we could be dipping for 136 before it tries to rebound. I think ARM may dip a little bit before we see something else. Coin has resistance at 308 and then support at 293. We're stuck in the middle. We might dip closer to 300 than 293 before it tries to rebound, but look for a little bit more downside as a stronger possibility. Amazon needs to hold above 202. If it does not hold that, we're at risk of coming back down for about 198 and then eventually this gap fill for 197. So reclaim 202, we're bullish. Otherwise, I do expect a rejection to 198 and 197. Meta has to hold above 568. Otherwise, there's a risk of it coming back down to 555. Microsoft needs to break past 420. Otherwise, there's a risk of 413. I think it's going to be dipping to 413 tomorrow. Google, this is in the middle. So it's completely stuck between 168 and 170. We need to reclaim 171.18 to turn bullish. There is some potential for it to try to push. If it can't do that, though, I think we do start to retest these lows down here. So reclaim 171, I turn bullish. If we can't do that, I think we come back down to 165. GameStop is rejecting. We'll have to see if we could break 30. Otherwise, this is at risk of 28 all over again. AMC might retest 4.7. DJT might be dipping to about 29.18. The VIX might come down to fill this gap, but there is one thing I want to call out. If you guys look at the VIX, notice that we hit, I think, let me go a little bit more back. Hold on one second. Okay, anyways. We hit the 14 area and bounced. We had 14, we bounced. We had 14, we bounced. And here we hit the 13s, then we bounced. So around 13 to 14, we do have a strong support on the VIX. Will the VIX dip a bit, then start bouncing if the market starts cooling off? We'll have to see about that. The 10-year looks a little bit more bearish. It's kind of dipping with the markets. So is the dollar. But the dollar and the 10-year are not affecting the market as much as they did before. So I'm not as concerned about them. With that being said, guys, for Tesla, we did have some negative news, and there is a risk of some downsides. We have that gap to fill below. So there is that risk of downside. Please keep that in mind. Otherwise, I thank you all so much for listening. Have a good rest of your day. I'll see you guys very soon tomorrow, and peace out.